great to have you in Kansas City.
My pleasure. Good to be here.
This is a bit of a dream, as we mentioned here and when I introduced you, that we've been working in the Acumen circuit for 2 years now, and we've built and designed this advanced leadership workshop model. As we thought about potential speakers to lean into our community, your name has been on the list for a couple of years.
Wonderful.
And it's been an exercise of trying to figure out how to make that work. So
great timing. Yes, my
grateful that you're a part of our teaching community and this topic of leadership. And today's topic is how the best leaders get better. And in your recent book, you talk about closing the gap between how good you are and how good you can be. Can you talk a little bit about that gap?
Sure. Well, I've never met anybody that was able to prove convincingly that they were the best they could possibly be. You know, I've never even met anybody that tried. I always like to think of Isaac Asimov, who wrote 511 books of science fiction before he passed. And I read a lot about his work ethic and his life, and I never read that he said, 511's it. You know, I've got 511 books in me, and once I do the 511th, I'm going to check out. So obviously, even he, who is perhaps one of the most prolific authors that you would ever find, never labored under the illusion that he had achieved his full potential. And that, to me, is really what the potential principle is. We all know how good we've become, but none of us know how good we can be. And that's what makes life interesting,
right?
Because when you wake up in the morning, I love the phrase tabula rasa, blank slate. No matter how good or bad yesterday was, we get a chance to try it again today. And you know, the epitome of monotony is when you do yesterday and you do today like you did yesterday, and you do yesterday like you did the week before. And it brings back that old cliche I thought was really corny when I was in high school, but I think it's really profound now, and that is that the only difference between a rut and a grave is distance and depth. And there are a lot of people that are in ruts, and they're very similar to graves because they really are shortchanging themselves, and they're shortchanging their potential. You know, John 10:10, Jesus said, "I came that you might have life and have it to the full." The full, not to the partial full, not to the semi-full, not to the half full. And that suggests to me, I'm not a theologian, but it suggests to me that we're supposed to live life to the full, which I would translate, the gospel according to Mark Sanborn, means to the best of our abilities, to the most of our potential.
Right. So you're going to be speaking to a group of business owners and entrepreneurs.
I am.
Small to mid-market.
Who are those
businesses.
people? You didn't mention
well,
that.
Well, I should have told you sooner.
I was going to say, you said, could we do a little interview? And next thing you know, I'm on stage.
It's a little test to see how agile you are.
By the way, there are some countries in the world that literally, I won't mention, but they're not countries that most of us go to, that will hire a speaker for an event, and then as they're driving to the event say, "Oh, there's a group of school children that are expecting you," and you're like, "That's not in my contract." "Oh, but they'll be so disappointed." So then they drive you to the school and you speak at the school, and then they'll, after the event, go, "There's a group of business people that have gathered in your honor." I kid you not. It sounds crazy, but that's one of the ways you hire a speaker for an hour and get them to speak for several hours.
Right. Well, they're next door. You can lay your eyes on them.
There's some school children we're going to be talking with after the program.
They're after
today.
the program, yes. So save some energy. You know, the emphasis on this is leadership. You've spoken to 2,600 different organizations over your career around the globe, as you've just mentioned. What in this stage of your career? What are some of the nuances around this word leadership? I think it gets thrown into a cliche bucket a lot of kind of this catch-all phrase, but there's obviously you've seen where it's been impactful, effective, influential, and you've seen where it's not been the case. Maybe you could share any insights or perspectives.
Well, first of all, leadership, despite the contrarian authors that try to convince us it's passé and it's dead, it's not dead. As a matter of fact, Warren Bennis, I almost said Warren Buffett, but Warren Bennis, before he passed away, said, "I can now speak of the demise of leadership without the risk of hyperbole." But he said that in 1999 and then wrote 2 more books on leadership. So I think he was trying to go for the shock value by suggesting that leadership was dead. The biggest change in leadership I've seen isn't in leadership, it's in followership. And that the people that we lead today, we refer to them as followers just out of convenience, but don't ever call them followers. It'd be like going to the grocery store and calling the man or woman that runs out, that checks out, a servant. They are service providers, but they're not servants. Followers may be beneath you on the org chart, but they want to be treated as collaborators or team members or contributors or associates. And I always tell leaders, when you change how you talk about the people on your team, it'll change how you treat the people on your team. And that, to me, I think that millennials and digitals and whatever comes next, increasingly they understand the hierarchy of an organization, but they never want to be treated as followers. And frankly, if you do, what that basically suggests is do what I say. Well, you can program a computer to do what you say. The unique contribution of an employee is to add value by helping you achieve your goals or your strategic results. So I think that's a big change a lot of leaders haven't really come to terms with yet because they're older. It's not that older leaders are right or wrong, they just grew up in a different time, and sometimes we miss the contextual shift. I also think that, this has been a belief of mine from the very beginning, is that leadership is a skill set, it's not a title. We've all worked for, John Gardner used to say, we've all worked for a leader that couldn't lead a group of 7-year-olds to an ice cream truck. And that's true because they got a title that suggests they're a leader, but they never developed the skill set or the chops.
Right.
Very often, titles were given in lieu of a pay increase or as a reward, not because of demonstrated abilities in leadership. 66% of companies in America today have a program for identifying potential leaders, but only 24% of the CEOs say the program's working. Because I think, and I don't know if the research bears this out, but my opinion is it's one thing to identify, it's another thing to develop. If I identify that my son has potential in the piano, I better get him piano lessons. Unless he's a child prodigy, his potential will require development. So I think the intentional development of leadership versus the survival of the fittest, who survived the last layoff, who's the most powerful, who knows where the most bodies are buried, which frankly is kind of an old school thought, rises to the top. And of course, thankfully and gratefully, that period hopefully is for the most part behind us.
Right. Final question having to do with this notion of servant leadership. In our community, I think we see a lot of aspiration toward that, but there's sometimes a disconnect, and we all fall back to our human tendencies. How would you work with and unpack the word servant leadership?
Well, having just said that, people in service don't want to be called servants, it's interesting because, Greenleaf was at AT&T, which was a maniacally hierarchical organization, and his premise is that the job of a leader was to serve, not to be served. So the word choice was servant leadership. I totally agree. I do think servant leadership is redundant. I think we do ourselves a disservice by suggesting there's any other kind of leadership. I always say that if you do something and only you benefit from it, that's an act of ambition. And there's nothing wrong with that. As long as it's legal, ethical, and moral, I'm okay with that. The problem is don't think it's leadership. It might be self-leadership, but true leadership always benefits the greater good. It benefits the team, it benefits the company, it benefits the community, it benefits the planet. And not necessarily all of those things, but I think the mark of all true leadership is it creates value for others. Creating value for yourself is ambition. Creating value for others is leadership. So I certainly agree with the premise. Greenleaf, really pioneered servant leadership. And I'm less concerned with the words that we use than the spirit that we embrace.
Thank you.
You bet. My pleasure.
Enjoyed. Appreciate your time. Thank you.